This video is part of my build series for the 3D printable Jabba's Palace complete with hangar. Today we are going to work on Set 5, the trophy room. In this diagram you can see where Set 5 fits into the overall design of the top floor. Set 5 is composed of 3 different sets that connect together. Massassi provides excellent instructions in a PDF file on how to print and assemble this set. He tells you which pieces to print and how many of each. And he breaks it down into, in this case, into sets 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. Here is a link to my video on how to use an FDM printer, the printer that I used, which is the Anycubic Cobra 3, and my slicer settings. Here are all the pieces that I printed. I wanted to figure out how much filament I used when printing set 5, so I made this spreadsheet. Each row is a part, and then I recorded the total filament that I used and the hours and minutes. To get these numbers, I went to my slicer and sliced each piece. Before I printed it, I wrote down the numbers. Here you can see the values. Total filament 132, total time 3 hours and 58 minutes. Back to the spreadsheet. If I scroll down to the bottom, you can see that I used a total of 4.4 rolls of filament, and it took 123 hours. Now we need to remove any supports from the printed pieces and clean up the edges. Here's a link to my video that shows you how to do that. Now it's time to start the assembly of set 5.1, and we start with the floor. So Massassi gives us some excellent instructions. We lay out the pieces according to the instructions, and then I'm going to glue them all together. First, I use a drill with a drill bit stop collar set to half the width of one of these 3mm by 14mm pins. And Massassi provides all these holes for us to connect them to. So I just drill out the holes. So that the pins go in nicely. Then I use pliers to insert the pins. And then I use Gorilla Glue to do the gluing. I glue this on a nice flat surface, which gives me my best chance of getting everything to line up and align perfectly. So we'll start with these two. So we'll push everybody together. Because we're using an FDM printer, there's always going to be gaps in between our pieces. But we want to have our best chance. So while the glue is still not set, I'm pushing everything really tightly together, as tight as I can. And I'm pushing it down flat on my flat surface to try and get the best fit that I can get. Then what I like to do is I'm going to let this completely dry before I move on to the next step. This is what set 5 looks like, completely assembled. And in this case, I glued the subsets 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 together into one solid piece. And here's the roof for set 5.1, and I didn't glue it in. I'll keep it removable. And over here is the ceiling for 5.2, and I printed out and added my own tabs to it, just so that I could set it on the top easier. And those will keep it from falling down. So I won't glue that, I'm just going to be setting it on the top. And here are the curtains that I printed. There's the larger ones and the smaller ones. The smaller ones go over here in the back. I was able to successfully print them on my FDM printer, so I didn't need my resin printer for them. I mounted them on 2.5mm stainless steel metal rods that I got from Amazon. Due to the nature of 3D printing, you are going to get seams between your pieces. Some are larger than others. Here is a link to my video that shows you how to effectively fill in all your seams. Here's what it looks like when all the seams have been finished. You can see the more yellow color of the wood filler on the bigger seams, and then most of it is covered with drywall compound, the white parts, and then sanded nice and smooth so that you don't even see the transitions once it's painted. And this is what the back looks like. So I have masked off this grate with painter's tape so I don't get mortar in it. And I've mixed up some mortar, and it's nice and thin. And then I'm going to apply it with my paintbrush, and I'll do this in 2 steps. Today I'll do it on all the floors, like the horizontal surfaces, and then I'll flip it over and do the vertical surfaces tomorrow after the floors have dried, just to keep it easy. And here is a link to my video that shows you more details about how to apply mortar. Here is what it looks like when the mortar is all finished. And when it's done, I like to just do a final go over of it to make sure everything is perfect. I can use a detail sander to just make sure, I already did this once, but just make sure that all my edges are clean and there's no mortar lipping up over the side. I'll use a dental pick for any small areas like this where I don't want mortar to interfere. Just kind of dig them out. Again, use a folded over piece of sandpaper. Just get all the mortar out of places where I don't want it to be. And then when everything is perfect, it's time to take it outside and spray the base coat. In this case, I'm going to use some Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch. It's a primer and paint all in one. And this one is Satin Nutmeg. Here you can see what it looks like when the base coat is dry. Now it is time to paint it. Here's a link to my video that shows you how I paint these sets. So, as per our painting strategy, we will start breaking down the base coat with the first burnt umber wash. So we'll just paint on all the walls. Allow it to flow into all the crevices. And we don't need to be specific. It's just a general wash, getting all the areas. If we get it over the edge, we just wipe it up. And we'll keep going and do the whole set, including the floor. At this point, I've applied all the washes. Then I use painter's tape to mask off all the outside areas that I don't want to paint. It doesn't need to be perfect on the edges. I have a lot of control with my airbrush, so I just need to mask the edges with a little bit of overlap, and then I'll spray under it, and then I won't get any of this. There'll be no danger. I'll have nice clean edges. Now we will go outside and use my airbrush to spray the next two colors. Here's a link to my video on how to use an airbrush with Tamiya paints. For these three grays, I'm going to use Tamiya XF91 IGN Gray. Shake it up. Stir it with a toothpick. I'm going to use a pipette to take about 1 milliliter out. Then I'm going to thin it with Tamiya X20A. Not 50-50, just a bit. $10 drops or so. Because I want it to flow and I want it to be a little bit more like a glaze over top of this brown. Then I'm going to use the Nick Pro #1 flat. And I'm just going to brush it onto the grids. I don't need to be too careful about getting into the absolute edges because there would probably be dirt there anyway. But I'm just going to glaze it over. For the curtains, I left them on the rods, and I'm using these. This is called Helping Hands that I bought on Amazon. And I just bought this, and it's turning out to be invaluable. So I left the curtains on the rods, and I used my airbrush, and I first sprayed them with Tamiya XF10 flat brown. And then I let that dry for a day, and then I went over them with XF51 khaki drab. And I just went vertically like this in lines, just to give it some more depth. And then the last thing I'm going to do is the same thing I do with everything. I just love doing black washes because they add the realism. They bring the pieces, the paints, the colors together, and it kind of blends the lines in. So I'm just going to give it a black wash. After the black wash, the curtains were still pretty dark. So what I decided to do was do another wash of this lighter tan, the 602 Country Twill from Folk Art. This is the same wash that I used on the pillows and couches for set 3. And that toned everything down nicer and made them look dustier, which is what I was after. So I did one coat. Now I'm just going to do a second coat just to make them really dusty. And then the curtains will be finished. For some parts of the walls, I feel like I've covered up all the washes with the airbrushing. So what I'm going to do is go back in with a little bit of a black wash. And I'll just kind of put it on. And I don't want it to be obvious. Like if I just let that dry, it would be quite obvious. So I'm just going to take a wet paper towel or a shop towel and just kind of pat it down a bit. And we can do that in some other places because I just want to get some of that darkness back. And that also gives us some nice streaking on the walls. So we'll do a little bit more of that. The other thing we'll do while we have the wash is I put this down here, the shop towel, to catch the drips. We always want to, like in my other videos, I do about 3 coats of washes in the hieroglyphics just to make it really stand out. Here is what it looks like when all the details have been painted. So what I did was, you already saw how I did the curtains. The curtain rod itself I painted with gunmetal, Tamiya X10. The rod holders here, here, and here I painted with Tamiya XF91 IGN gray. And then I just brushed on the edges some titanium silver X32 and on the sides here to show some wear. For the grids here, here, and these bars up here, I painted them with dark copper XF28. Then I did about 3 black washes over all of it. And for these particular grids, I used bronze X33 to darken it up a bit and do some highlighting. For these 2 lights, I used again the IGN gray XF91, and then I used some more gunmetal X10 just in dabbing in spots to add some color and shades, and then I washed those with a black wash. So this grid again was copper just like those ones, and 3 washes of black. The rust I put on was, I started with this Vallejo orange rust, and I did a coat here where the pipes are, and then I did some highlighting with this brighter color Vallejo light rust. And the pipes are again the IGN XF91. For the symbols here, I did it the same as with the other sets, about 5 coats of black wash. And then I went in and I used some Tamiya XF59, and I just repainted and highlighted the symbols themselves. The final step was to spray everything with Rust-Oleum Matte Clear. And here is what sets 1 to 5 look like all together. In my next video, I will show you how to resin print and paint the attributes for this set. Thank you for watching my build series video for the 3D printable Jabba's Palace complete with hanger from Massassi. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. If you have any other ideas or tips for how to complete any of the steps that I've shown, please leave us a comment below.